Jake Carter's oxygen meter blinked red as he drifted through the wreckage of another dead ship. 3 years he'd been doing this, crawling through the corpses of alien vessels, looking for anything worth selling. Most days he found junk. Sometimes he found treasure. Today felt different. The Valkyrie dreadnought floated like a ghost in the neutral zone, its running lights dark, its hull breached in a dozen places. Jake's scanner showed no life signs, which was normal. What wasn't normal was the power signature still pulsing from deep inside the ship. Something in there was still active. He cut through the outer airlock with his plasma torch, the metal peeling away like paper. His suit's HUD flickered as he crossed the threshold. Valkyrie ships always messed with human tech, something about the way they generated power. He'd learned to work around it. The interior was a mess. Blast marks scorched the walls. Bodies of Valkyrie warriors lay where they'd fallen, their crystalline armor shattered. This hadn't been an accident. This was a battle, and someone had lost badly. Jake moved deeper into the ship, following the power signature. It led him to a massive sealed door covered in symbols he couldn't read. His scanner showed the room beyond was still pressurized and temperature controlled. Whoever designed this place wanted whatever was inside to stay alive. It took him 20 minutes to bypass the door's security. When it finally hissed open, warm air rushed out, carrying a scent like ozone and flowers. Jake stepped inside and stopped dead. The throne room was enormous, decorated with flowing sculptures that seemed to shift in the dim emergency lighting. And there, slumped across a throne made of what looked like living crystal, was her. Queen Shavara of the Valkyrie Empire. Jake recognized her from the news feeds. Every scavenger in the zone knew what she looked like. 8 feet tall even sitting down, skin that shifted between deep blue and purple, with patterns of light dancing across her features. The Valkyrie were one of the most powerful species in the galaxy, and he was looking at their ruler. She was barely breathing. Dark fluid leaked from wounds across her torso, Valkyrie blood, he realized. And beside her on the floor, shattered into a dozen pieces, was her crown. Jake had heard stories about those crowns. They weren't just ceremonial. They were neural interfaces, quantum linked to every ship in the Valkyrie fleet. Without it, a queen was just another person. With it, she was a living command center. He should have left. Should have sealed that door and pretended he'd never seen this. Getting involved in alien politics was a good way to end up dead. But Jake had never been good at walking away from people who needed help. He knelt beside the crown fragments and started scanning them with his multitool. The internal structure was fascinating. Quantum processors woven through crystalline matrices, biological components merged with technology. It was like someone had taken a computer, a radio, and a living brain and merged them into art. His fingers touched the largest piece, feeling the faint warmth still radiating from it. The moment he made contact, everything changed. Shavara's eyes snapped open, brilliant yellow with vertical pupils like a cat. Her hand shot out faster than he could track, grabbing his wrist with crushing force. Her translator struggled to function, damaged like everything else, producing broken words. Only, mate, touch, crown. Her voice was layered, harmonics that made his teeth ache. Sacred, bonded, death. Jake froze. He knew enough about Valkyrie culture to understand what she was saying. Their crowns had defenses built in at a genetic level. Only the queen and her chosen mate could handle them. Anyone else would be struck dead by bioelectric feedback the moment they made contact. But he was still alive. Still breathing. Still very much not dead. Shavara stared at him, her grip slowly loosening. Her eyes were wide with something that might have been shock or fear or disbelief. Jake couldn't tell, reading alien expressions was always a gamble. She released his wrist and leaned back against her throne, those yellow eyes never leaving him. Her head tilted slightly, studying him like he was a puzzle that didn't make sense. The light patterns on her skin pulsed faster, some kind of emotional response, maybe. Jake cleared his throat. So. I'm guessing that wasn't supposed to happen. She didn't answer. Just kept staring. He looked down at the crown fragment still in his hand, then back at her. Whatever had just happened, whatever impossible thing the crown had just done by accepting him, had changed everything. Valkyrie law was absolute. Their technology didn't make mistakes. If the crown accepted someone, there was a reason. Jake set the fragment down carefully and pulled out his repair kit. Look, I don't know what's going on here, but you're hurt and this crown is broken. Let me help. We'll figure out the rest later. Shavara watched him work in silence, her expression unreadable. But she didn't stop him. And somewhere in the back of Jake's mind, a small voice whispered that his simple life as a scavenger had just ended forever. 3 days Jake spent working on that crown, and 3 days Shavara watched him like a predator studying prey. Except predators didn't look confused, and she definitely looked confused. The first night, Jake set up his portable camp in the throne room. He wasn't about to leave her alone in this condition, and moving her seemed like a bad idea with those wounds. He heated up a ration pack while running diagnostics on the crown fragments, the smell of synthetic beef filling the ancient chamber. "You eat that." Shavara's translator crackled to life. Her wounds were already healing, apparently Velkari recovered fast. Jake shrugged. "It's food. Technically." He looked up at her. "What do your people eat?" "Protein matrices. Harvested from our home seas." She paused. "It does not smell like burning plastic." He laughed, and she flinched at the sound. Right. Different species, different reactions. He'd have to remember that. By the second day, she started talking more. Told him what happened. Her own court had turned on her, 3 rival houses working together, which apparently never happened in Velkari politics. They'd ambushed her ship during a routine patrol, killed her guards, and shattered her crown. Without it, she couldn't call for help, couldn't command her fleet, couldn't even prove she was still the rightful queen. "They left you here to die," Jake said, carefully fusing 2 crown fragments with his microwelder. "Yes." No emotion in her voice, but those light patterns on her skin flickered dark purple. It was efficient. No assassination to investigate. Just a tragic accident in the neutral zone. Jake shook his head. "Your people sound like real charmers. We are a hierarchical species. Power flows upward. Always upward." She leaned forward slightly. "Your people are different." "Humans? We're all over the place. Some of us cooperate, some of us fight, most of us just try to get through the day." He tested a connection, watching the quantum matrix flicker to life. "We're messy. But we look out for each other when it counts. Yet you live alone. Scavenging in the zone." That hit closer than he expected. "Yeah, well. Looking out for each other doesn't mean we're always good at it." The silence stretched between them. Jake focused on his work, pretending not to notice her staring. On the third day, she asked the question he'd been waiting for. "Why are you helping me?" Jake didn't look up from the delicate calibration he was performing. "You needed help." "That is not a reason. You could have taken valuable components and left. You could have sold information about my location. You could have done many profitable things." Her voice carried genuine confusion. "Instead you stay here, in danger, helping someone from a species that has never acknowledged yours as equals." He finally met her eyes. "Where I come from, we've got this idea. If you can help someone and you don't, that says something about who you are. I don't like what it says." Shavara stared at him for a long moment. "That is, inefficient." "Probably. But it lets me sleep at night." Something shifted in her expression, the Velkari equivalent of a smile, maybe. "You are strange, Jake Carter." "Yeah, I get that a lot." As the hours passed, they talked about everything. She told him about growing up as crown princess, trained from birth to rule, never allowed to choose her own path. About the weight of expectations from a civilization spanning hundreds of worlds. About how lonely it was at the top of a hierarchy where everyone saw you as a position, not a person. Jake told her about Earth, about growing up in the colony stations, about losing his family in a transport accident and ending up out here in the zone. About how fixing things helped him feel like he was putting something back together, even if it wasn't the things he'd lost. "The crown is not just technology," she said softly. "It is our connection to the throne. To our ancestors. Every queen in our history has worn one." She paused. "They all chose their mates carefully. Political alliances. Strategic advantages. Careful selection over months or years." Jake carefully aligned the final fragments. "And yours picked a human scavenger it met for 5 seconds." "Yes. Your ancestors have a weird sense of humor." This time he definitely heard her laugh, a sound like crystal chimes. The crown was nearly complete now, all the pieces fused back together, the quantum matrices realigned and synchronized. It sat on the workbench between them, pulsing with a soft blue light. Beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "When you put this on," Jake said slowly, "you're going to be connected to your fleet again. You'll be able to call for help, reclaim your throne." He met her eyes. "But that bond thing. The mate recognition. That's still going to be there, isn't it?" "Yes." Shavara's patterns flickered with something he couldn't read. "Velkari bonds are permanent. encoded in the crown itself. It cannot be undone without killing both parties. So when you go back to your empire, they will know. The crown's signature will announce it to every ship, every station, every world in our territory. She looked down at her hands. A human mate bond will be seen as madness. Or weakness. Or both. Jake picked up the crown, feeling its weight, feeling the faint pulse of energy running through it. 3 days ago he'd been a nobody scavenger. Now he was holding the fate of an empire in his hands. What if we don't hide it? He said. She looked at him sharply. What if we use it? Show them that different doesn't mean weak. He turned the crown slowly, watching light refract through the crystal. You said your people value efficiency and strength. Well, humans have both. We just package it differently. You would return with me? Face an empire that will see you as an insult to everything they believe. Jake grinned. I've faced worse odds. Usually right before I found something valuable. He held out the crown. This was the moment. Once she took it from his hands, once she placed it back on her head, everything would change. The bond would be complete, recognized, unbreakable. Shavara stood slowly, gracefully, towering over him. For a moment she just looked at the crown, then at him. Her hand reached out, steady and sure. Their fingers met on the crystal surface. The crown exploded with light. The moment the crown flared to life, Jake felt like his brain had been plugged into the universe itself. Suddenly he could sense things that shouldn't be possible. Ships hanging in space thousands of miles away, their crews moving through corridors, energy flowing through reactors. It was overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying all at once. And through it all, he felt her. Shavara's presence in his mind, not as thoughts or words, but as something deeper. Her determination, her fear, her hope. Everything she was, connected to everything he was. She gasped, stumbling slightly, and he reached out to steady her. Through their link he felt her experiencing the same thing. His memories, his emotions, his essentially human way of seeing the world flooding into her consciousness. This is. She started, then stopped. They didn't need words anymore. They both understood. After a moment, Shavara straightened, the crown settling into place on her head like it had never been broken. Her eyes blazed brighter, and Jake felt her reaching out through the crown's network, finding her loyal ships scattered across the zone. Within an hour, they were moving. Shavara's personal guards arrived first, shocked to find their queen alive. Then came her military advisors, her loyal nobles, her fleet commanders. They gathered at Borderworld Station, a massive trading hub that served as neutral ground between territories. Jake stood beside Shavara's throne as her people filed into the council chamber. He felt every eye on him, felt the confusion and disgust radiating from most of them. Humans were considered barely civilized by most galactic standards, clever scavengers at best, pests at worst. Admiral Kethron, her senior military commander, spoke first. My queen, we rejoice to hear you survived. But. His gaze slid to Jake. There are rumors. About the crown. About a bond. The rumors are true. Shavara's voice rang out clear and strong. The crown recognized Jake Carter of Earth as my mate bond. This is done. The chamber erupted. Voices overlapped in a dozen different dialects, all expressing variations of the same shock and outrage. One of her advisors, an elderly Velkari named Shakel, stepped forward. My queen, with respect, this is impossible. The human must have tampered with the crown. Used some primitive technology to fool its systems. Jake felt anger flash through their bond, Shavara's, not his own. But before she could speak, he stepped forward. You think I hacked a quantum biological neural interface that your people have been perfecting for 10,000 years? He pulled out his datapad. Using what, exactly? My multi-tool and a portable scanner. Then how? Shakel began. I don't know how, Jake interrupted. I just fixed it. The crown did the rest. He looked around the chamber at all the hostile faces. But since we're all here, and since you're all convinced humans are primitive, let me show you something. He walked to the central console and jacked in his datapad. Within seconds, he pulled up the schematics for their current flagship. This is your primary dreadnought, right? The one you're all so proud of. Kethron's eyes narrowed. How did you access? Not important. What's important is this. Jake highlighted a section of the power distribution network. You're losing about 15% efficiency through these relays. They're configured for redundancy, which is smart, but the quantum routing is inefficient. Watch. His fingers flew across the interface, rerouting power flows, optimizing distribution patterns. Within minutes, the ship's efficiency rating climbed. Alarms started going off as engineers throughout the fleet suddenly found their ships performing better than they ever had. And this section here, Jake continued, warming to his subject, your shield generators are working against each other. If you phase them like this. More adjustments. You get a 20% increase in coverage with the same power draw. The chamber had gone silent. Everyone stared at the readouts showing improvements their own engineers had missed. Your stealth systems are outdated, Jake went on. Your sensor arrays have blind spots you could fly a shuttle through. Your weapons targeting could be twice as fast with better processing algorithms. He looked around the room. You want to know why the Crown accepted me? Maybe it knew you needed someone who sees problems differently. Shivara stood, moving to stand beside him. The galaxy is changing. Human technology advances faster than any other species because they think differently. They innovate. They adapt. Her voice carried the weight of command. My rivals tried to kill me because they feared change. I will not make their mistake. But not everyone was convinced. Through their bond, Jake felt Shivara sense something, a disturbance in the fleet's communication network. Someone was broadcasting this meeting to the outer territories. To her enemies. Sure enough, the main view screen flickered to life. Lord Caxtor appeared, his scarred face twisted in disgust. He was one of the three who'd betrayed her, and he clearly thought he still had the advantage. The crown has been corrupted, he announced. Queen Shivara has been compromised by alien influence. Under ancient law, I challenge her claim to the throne. Trial by combat, as is our right. The chamber went silent. Trial by combat was absolute in Velkari law, a way to prove worthiness to rule when claims were disputed. Normally the queen would fight herself, proving her strength. But everyone knew the loophole. Everyone understood what Caxtor was really doing. By law, Caxtor continued, his voice dripping with false respect, the queen's bonded mate may fight in her stead. He smiled, showing too many teeth. If the human wishes to prove the bond is true, let him face me in the arena. Unless he is too afraid. Jake felt Shivara's surge of protective anger through their link. She wanted to refuse, to fight herself, to keep him safe. But refusing would mean admitting the bond was false. It would mean losing everything they just started to build. He put his hand over hers, squeezing gently. Through their connection, he sent calm, confidence, determination. She looked at him, those yellow eyes wide with fear for him. I accept, Jake said loudly, before she could stop him. Name the time and place. Caxtor's smile widened. Tomorrow. Dawn cycle. The traditional arena on Borderworld Station. He leaned forward. I will enjoy showing the Empire what happens to those who disrespect our ways, human. The transmission cut out. The council chamber erupted again, but Jake barely heard it. He was too busy feeling Shivara's emotions crashing through their bond, fear, anger, desperation. She grabbed his arm, pulling him to face her. You cannot do this. Caxtor has trained for combat his entire life. He has killed more warriors than you have met. Probably, Jake agreed. But I didn't survive 3 years in the neutral zone by being the strongest. I survived by being smarter. Smart does not stop claws and blades. He met her eyes. Then I guess I better figure something out by tomorrow. Jake didn't sleep that night. He spent the hours studying every recording he could find of Velkari combat trials, watching how they moved, how they fought, looking for patterns. Caxtor was a decorated war leader with over 50 victories in personal combat. Jake was an engineer who'd been in exactly 3 bar fights in his entire life, and he'd lost 2 of them. The math wasn't encouraging. Shivara sat beside him in silence for most of the night, their bond humming with her worry. Finally, as the station's lights began simulating dawn, she spoke. You could forfeit. Say the bond was a mistake. I would lose the throne, but you would live. Jake didn't look away from the screen showing Caxtor tearing through an opponent. And then what? You think he'd just let you retire peacefully? He tried to kill you once already. He would kill me quickly. It is our way. Her voice was flat, accepting. Better than watching you die for a crown you never wanted. Now Jake did look at her. Through their bond, he felt the genuine care behind her words. Somewhere in the past 3 days, between fixing her crown and sharing their minds, they'd become something more than convenient allies. I've got a better idea, he said. How about neither of us dies, and we make Caxtor regret starting this whole thing? She wanted to believe him. He felt it through their connection. But she'd also seen what Caxthor could do. The arena was ancient, built into Borderworld Station centuries ago when trials by combat were more common. A circular space 50 meters across, with walls of reinforced crystal that let the audience watch safely. Energy barriers hummed at various points, remnants of the arena's original configuration, now mostly decorative. Jake stood in the center, wearing light armor that Shavara's guards had provided. It fit poorly and felt like wearing a tin can, but it was better than nothing. Across from him, Caxthor entered to cheers from his supporters. The Velkari warrior was massive, covered in ceremonial battle scars, his armor decorated with symbols of his victories. The entire fleet watched via broadcast. Thousands of Velkari eyes on this moment, waiting to see their queen's human mate get torn apart. No pressure. The adjudicator, a neutral elder from another house, raised his hand. Traditional combat. First blood ends it, or surrender, or death. The victor's claim is law. He looked between them. Begin. Caxthor didn't waste time talking. He charged immediately, covering the distance between them in 3 massive strides. Jake barely rolled aside in time, feeling the wind from the warrior's claws pass inches from his face. Too close. Way too close. Caxthor spun with terrifying speed, sweeping low. Jake jumped back, but not far enough. Claws caught his armor, screeching across the metal, leaving deep gouges. The crowd roared. Through his bond with Shavara, Jake felt her fear spike. He pushed back reassurance, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. Caxthor advanced, methodical now, driving Jake backward toward the arena wall. This was what the warrior knew: intimidation, overwhelming force, breaking his opponents will before breaking their body. But Jake had spent 3 years in the neutral zone, where every scavenger learned the same lesson: when you can't win by strength, you change the game. He let himself be backed up against the wall, let Caxthor think he was trapped. The warrior lunged, going for a killing strike. At the last second, Jake dropped flat and rolled. Caxthor's momentum carried him forward, his claws slamming into the crystal wall and sticking for just a moment. Jake was already moving. He grabbed one of the loose power conduits from a decorative energy barrier and yanked hard. The conduit sparked and whipped free, still carrying a charge. He jammed it against Caxthor's armor. The warrior roared and spun, electricity crackling across his body. Not enough to seriously hurt him through that armor, but enough to hurt, enough to make him angry. Good. Angry people made mistakes. Caxthor charged again, but wilder this time, telegraphing his moves. Jake dodged left, then right, using his smaller size and better agility. He wasn't trying to hurt the warrior, not yet. He was learning his patterns, watching how he moved when he was furious. The crowd's cheers turned to murmurs of confusion. This wasn't how trials were supposed to go. The human should be dead by now. Jake led Caxthor on a chase around the arena, staying just out of reach. He used the old energy barriers as obstacles, forcing the warrior to go around or through them. Each time, Jake gained a little distance, learned a little more. But he was getting tired. Human stamina was good, but Velkari didn't seem to get tired at all. Eventually he'd slow down, and eventually Caxthor would catch him. Time to change tactics again. Jake stopped running. He turned to face the warrior, standing in the center of the arena. Through his bond, he felt Shavara's confusion and fear. Caxthor slowed, suspicious. Ready to die with dignity, human? Actually, I wanted to ask you something. Jake kept his voice conversational, loud enough for the broadcast to pick up. What have you built? The warrior blinked. What? I'm serious. You're a decorated war leader. You've won dozens of combat trials. Very impressive. Jake gestured around the arena. But what have you actually built? What have you created? What will you leave behind besides bodies? I leave behind strength. Victory. The continuation of our way. See, that's interesting. Jake started walking slowly sideways, and Caxthor mirrored him, circling. Because I fixed a crown your people couldn't repair. I improved ships your engineers couldn't optimize. In 3 days, I added more value to your empire than you have in your entire military career. The crowd was silent now. This wasn't trash talk in the normal sense. This was something else. The trial isn't about who's stronger, Jake continued. It's about who's worthy to stand beside the queen. Who can help her lead. He stopped walking. So I'll ask again. What have you built, Caxthor? What can you create? What makes you worthy of anything except fighting and killing? For the first time, uncertainty crossed the warrior's face. His entire life had been about combat, about victory through strength. He'd never considered that strength alone might not be enough. Jake pressed his advantage. The crown recognized me because your empire needs to evolve. You can kill me right now, probably. But it won't change what I am or what I represent. Humans build. We create. We solve problems. He met Caxthor's eyes. We're the future, whether you like it or not. The only question is whether you're smart enough to see it. Caxthor roared and charged, but there was desperation in it now. Jake didn't run this time. He stood his ground until the last possible second, then dropped and swept the warrior's legs. Caxthor crashed down hard. Before he could recover, Jake was on his back, using a trick he'd learned from a bar fight on Station 7. He got an arm around the warrior's throat, not to choke him, but to control his head. Yield, Jake said quietly, just for Caxthor's ears. You've already lost. Not because I'm stronger, but because you've got nothing to offer except more of what's already failing. For a long moment, neither moved. The arena held its breath. Then, slowly, Caxthor tapped twice on the ground. The traditional sign of surrender. The arena exploded with noise, shock, outrage, disbelief, and from some corners, cheering. Jake released the warrior and stood, offering his hand to help him up. Caxthor stared at that hand for a long moment before taking it. The victory in the arena should have ended things, but Jake quickly learned that nothing in galactic politics was ever that simple. Winning the trial secured Shavara's immediate claim to the throne, but half the Empire still thought she was crazy for bonding with a human. The other half was just waiting to see if this was all going to collapse spectacularly. Jake spent the next week in constant meetings with Velkari nobles, military commanders, and economic ministers. Most of them looked at him like he was a trained animal that had learned a cute trick. Some were openly hostile. A few, mostly the younger ones, seemed genuinely curious about what a human perspective might offer. The real test came during the Imperial Council session. Every major house sent representatives, filling the massive chamber on Shavara's flagship. She sat on her throne with Jake standing beside her, and he could feel through their bond how much she hated the formality of it all. Lord Ventar, head of the oldest noble house, spoke first. My queen, we acknowledge your victory in the trial. But the question remains, what benefit does this alliance bring to our empire? Humans are barely spacefaring. Their territory is small, their military insignificant. Why should we accept this? Jake had been expecting this. He pulled up his datapad and projected a hologram into the center of the room, star charts showing human expansion over the past 50 years. You're right that we're small compared to empires like yours, he said. 50 years ago, humans barely had functional spacecraft. Now we have colonies on 70 worlds, trading relationships with a dozen species, and technology that's advancing faster than any other civilization in known space. He zoomed in on specific sectors. While you've been maintaining what you already have, we've been growing exponentially. Growth means nothing without stability, Ventar countered. Stability means nothing without adaptation. Jake changed the projection to show technological advancement curves. Look at your own records. Velkari technology has improved by maybe 5% in the last century. Human technology has increased by over 300% in the same time period. We went from chemical rockets to quantum drives in 70 years. We figured out your shielding technology in a decade after first seeing it. He let that sink in before continuing. You can ignore us, sure. But in another 50 years, we're not going to be the primitive species you look down on. We're going to be the ones other civilizations turn to for innovation. He looked around the room. The question isn't whether humans are worth your time. It's whether you're smart enough to partner with us now, before we become your competitors instead. The chamber erupted in debate. Some called it arrogance. Others saw the data and couldn't argue with it. Jake caught sight of a few younger Velkari making notes on their own datapads, clearly intrigued. Shavara let the debate rage for a few minutes before standing. The room immediately went silent. Queens didn't stand during council sessions unless something important was about to happen. We are at a crossroads, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. My rivals tried to kill me because they feared change. They feared that our old ways were being challenged. She looked down at the assembled nobles. They were right to fear, but wrong in their response. Change is not our enemy. Stagnation is. She placed her hand on Jake's shoulder, the gesture deliberate and symbolic. This human saved my life. He repaired technology our own engineers could not. He defeated a trained warrior not through strength, but through intelligence. And in doing so, he showed us what we have forgotten, that there are many kinds of strength. Ventar stood slowly. And what exactly are you proposing, my queen? A new direction. We open our borders to real collaboration with human territories. Joint research facilities. Shared technology development. Cultural exchanges. She paused. We make humanity not our subjects, but our partners. The debate that followed lasted 3 hours. Jake stopped counting how many times someone called the idea dangerous or unprecedented or insane. But he also noticed something interesting. The younger council members were mostly in favor. It was the old guard, the ones who'd held power for decades, who resisted hardest. Finally, Shavara called for a vote. It wasn't unanimous, nothing ever was in Velkari politics, but it passed. Barely. 53% in favor. That night, Jake found himself alone with Shavara in her private quarters. The crown sat on a table between them, no longer a symbol of division but a reminder of how much had changed in such a short time. 53%, he said. That's not exactly a mandate. It is enough. She reached out, her hand finding his. The bond between them hummed with contentment. The rest will come around. Or they will not. Either way, we move forward. You know this is going to be messy, right? Jake squeezed her hand. Half your people still think I'm a primitive upstart. And when word gets back to Earth that I'm mate bonded to an alien queen, my own people are going to lose their minds. Good. The light patterns on her skin flickered with amusement. Comfortable people do not innovate. Uncomfortable people find solutions. Over the following months, things did get messy. 3 more noble houses tried to challenge Shavara's rule, though none were stupid enough to demand trial by combat after what happened to Caxthor. Human diplomats arrived and promptly had diplomatic incidents because nobody had bothered to explain Velkari customs properly. The first joint research station almost collapsed when human engineers kept questioning why things were done certain ways and Velkari scientists kept getting offended at the questions. But slowly, impossibly, it started working. Human innovation combined with Velkari resources produced results neither species could have achieved alone. A young Velkari engineer named Shatan developed a new engine designed by applying human problem-solving methods. A human scientist named Lisa Chen figured out how to synthesize Velkari biological components, opening up entirely new fields of research. Jake found himself traveling between human and Velkari territories constantly, serving as a living bridge between 2 very different cultures. It was exhausting and frustrating and occasionally terrifying, but he'd never felt more useful in his life. Late one night, he stood with Shavara on the observation deck of her flagship, watching the stars stream past. Through their bond, he felt her quiet satisfaction, her hope for what they were building together. Do you ever regret it? He asked. That day your crown chose me instead of some proper Velkari noble. She was quiet for a moment, considering. No, she said finally. A proper noble would have done what was expected. Would have maintained what already existed. She turned to look at him. You showed me that broken things, when repaired properly, can become stronger than they were before. The crown? The empire. Myself. Her hand found his. Us. Jake smiled. 3 months ago, he'd been a nobody scavenger hoping to find enough salvage to pay for his next meal. Now he was helping reshape relations between species, standing beside an alien queen, connected to her in ways he still didn't fully understand. The galaxy was changing. Humans were no longer the primitive newcomers everyone could safely ignore. The Velkari were no longer locked into their rigid hierarchies. Other species watched nervously, wondering if they needed to adapt to or risk being left behind. And at the center of it all was a broken crown that had somehow known exactly what it was doing when it chose a human scavenger who believed the best thing you could do was help people who needed it. Jake looked at Shavara, feeling the bond between them pulse with shared understanding, shared hope, shared determination to build something better than what came before. So, he said. What's next? Through their connection, he felt her smile. Everything.